Okay, in this guide, I'm going to talk to you about the EPQ and reflection, and I will try to explain why I feel reflection is included in the EPQ and it's an important part of it, and the justifications for that, and then how to maybe maximize your reflection marks as you go through the different stages where it's looked at, and then the specific summary and reflection stage, which is towards the end of the project. So, reflection in general. Reflection is a really, really important part of learning. And I really like this quote here. We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And that kind of sums up learning at school, but also afterwards as well. And you'll find now many in the world of work, many organizations ask their staff to be reflective, and they'll have an appraisal process and they'll ask them to look back on what's gone well over the last year or 6 months or however often they do the reflection, and then what to do going forward. And so it's a skill, it's a life skill that's really important going forward. And that's why I think that reflection has been included in the extended project, and it's a chance for you to practice that skill. And again, you're going to use it hopefully for the rest of your studies at school or at university, and then in later life. And this kind of sums it up as well. Yeah, so if you're reflecting, then it allows you to take stock, to see what you've done well, and then where the gaps are and what you need to do going forward and how you're going to make those improvements. If you don't do that, you haven't learned from your experiences. So there's no point in having them. And so actually reflections are really, really important tool and skill, as I've said. Things in general that you should be looking at in terms to reflect, what went well and what didn't go so well, and what improvements are needed to make this thing better, and what can I achieve if I do make these improvements. And that's the sort of mindset you need to have for any reflection, as I said, at school or at work. But actually now let's turn this back a bit more to the EPQ. You should already be thinking how you can apply that to your project. So what are the areas of your project that you felt went really, really well? You might have been making something, you actually really enjoyed that, so that went really quickly and easily, but actually you might have struggled when it came to actually finding the background research. And so that's a reflection, and you can talk about that. And so if you were to start this project again, what might you do differently, and how could you improve based on that? These are the sorts of things that we're talking about when we're talking about reflection. For the EPQ, for the AQA EPQ, reflection is a really, really important part of it, and it's weaved throughout the whole project actually. So there's actually so 20% of the marks, so AO4, is called review. So if reflecting is not reviewing, I don't know what it is. So 10 marks overall, which is 20% of your marks just for the review. And this is a quote from the review section. You need to show a detailed and careful evaluation of the strengths and weaknesses of the completed project in relation to the planning, implementation, and outcomes, and the candidate's own learning during the project. So you need to be reflecting, you need to be thinking about, right, what went well, what did you do really well on the planning? And it might be that there are some sections of the planning that went well, you started with really good intentions and they tailed off, or the other way around. Some people can start a bit chaotic and not really know what's going on, and actually as the project progresses, the planning gets clearer, the view becomes clearer, and your timetables and what you need to do next was better. So you just need to reflect on your planning, what went well, what didn't so much. Implementation, so you might have had this great plan, but when it actually came to doing it, might have fallen down, or the other way around. Your plan might not have been there, but actually you feel that doing it, that's how you were better able to cope, and your timetable and your scale came from there. And then outcomes, so that's why lots of the reflection does tend to be after the fact, so once you're finished, but actually you can be reflecting as you go through. You should be reflecting as you go through. As can be seen here. So as well as the AO4 being review in itself, actually reflection comes from the other assessment objectives as well. So in the AO1, which is your planning, the grading criteria says that you need to monitor the progress of your project against agreed objectives. Well, that's reflecting as well. You need to be thinking each time, well, right, what's gone well, what hasn't, what do I need to do next time? AO3, which is the develop and realize. Some people see that as the kind of outcome. So in there it says there is a clear evidence of appropriate changes to or development of the initial project plan or title or aims and objectives with clear and appropriate reasons for these changes. So, I often have students come to me saying, oh, I've changed my title, it's the end of the world, do I need to start again? Well, no, this is actually part of it. You need to reflect on, well, there must be a reason why you want to change your title. So changing your title is not an issue, as long as you've reasoned it through and you've got a justification, as it says there, for doing it. And you might have been going down a path with one title and know that that's not going to produce a good project at some point. And so you've reflected on that. You've thought about it. You thought, actually, this isn't going to give me what I need, and so I'm going to take it in another direction. That's actually really good. So there are two ways of changing your title. You can have one title, end up with another, have made no mention of it. That's not great, because that doesn't show reflection. That just shows that you've changed your mind and you haven't thought about it. But actually, if you go through and say, look, I'm changing my title and this is why, that's a very different story. And so you need to make reference to that. And I've put there in your planning review, in your mid-project review, in your project product review, these sections of your production log or project queue are the areas where you can show that reflection. It's why the AQA have asked you to fill those sections out, so you can show this reflection, you can show this skill that they're looking for. And you would need to show it throughout, I think. The big area where lots of students do tend to get a fair number of review marks, AO4 marks, is the summary and reflection page. There is one section of your production log, your project queue, which is titled Summary and Reflection. And at the top of there, it asks for some of these things that I've mentioned. It asks you to think about what you've learned. So that could be a skill, it could be information and knowledge from completing the project. What new knowledge or expertise have you enjoyed or found valuable? And so are there skills, are there research skills, maybe are there time management skills that you can apply to other subjects, looking at university or looking at the world of work, things like that? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your project? No project's going to be perfect, and it's good to be aware of that, and you can put that down. And you might have found it really difficult to get a material that you wanted to get if you were building something, or difficult to get people to act in the play that you've come up with, or the skill that you're trying to teach them. It was hard to organize people. That's fine. It's not it is potentially a weakness, but it's not a problem in the project, as long as you're aware of it and you kind of reflect on it and you say, okay, well, this is the problem, this is why it was, this is what I'll do differently next time. What skills have you improved? As I say, that could be from essay writing to referencing, whatever new skills that you've got now that you didn't have at the start of doing your EPQ. It could be more manual. As I say, if you're doing an artifact, it might be, I don't know, stitching. You might be making a garment or something. What changes would I make if I undertook such work again? So, looking back, what would you tell your younger self to try and make this process better? What advice would you give to others undertaking this sort of project? So, this summary and reflection page is a page on the production log on project queue. You talk about the strengths, the weaknesses, what you would do differently, what outcomes that might give you, talk about skills you may have gained. So there's lots to talk about there. What I would say is that any one of these things that I spoke about, so I spoke earlier about AO4, which is where the assessment marks you get in your summary and reflection. I spoke about AO1 and AO3. Any one of those sections, if you just did one, it would probably be difficult to get full marks. So what I often find is students do a really, really good summary and reflection page, and so they can get a decent amount of AO4 marks, but actually the reflection throughout seems to be missing a bit. And so I would say it would be hard to get full marks if you don't show consistent reflection. So you would struggle to get maybe 8, 9 or 10 marks for your AO4 if you're only reflecting in your summary and reflection. The presentation is another good place that you can gain reflection marks as well, because you can pick up any marks in the presentation. And if you're talking about your strengths and weaknesses there, if you can maybe make that slightly different to what's in your summary and reflection, add some detail to it, you get a good question from your supervisor, that can add to your reflection marks as well. So hopefully that's giving you a bit of an overview of what reflection is in general, why it's included in the EPQ, and then how to try and maybe get those reflection marks throughout.